Our second speaker is being very kind to me. He's not asking me to introduce him by his full name. And tells me I can introduce him as Irek. In fact, he even offered that I could introduce him as Adam if I felt Irek was even too difficult. So, a very flexible speaker. Irek graduated from the Faculty of Law and Administration at the University of Warsaw. From 2001 to 2006, he worked at IBM Poland as Vice President of Operations. Subsequently, he was with the TP Group, ultimately in charge of corporate strategy and business development. He then created his own legal advisors law office and then joined CMS Cameron McKenna, was appointed a partner of the Warsaw office. He joined Polish Post in July 2013 in his current position of Vice President of the Management Board. So please welcome Irek.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I'm really flexible. I actually became flexible after I joined Post. I mean, that was absolutely required in order to change things. We took a liberty, and instead of talking about redefining delivery, we actually focus on redefining universality. I think there's another side of what Kun just presented. And because we are in a very nice chateau, let me start from a bit of history. October 18th of 1558 was a time when the Polish Post has been born by the decree of our King Sigismundus Augustus. And that time we opened the first route from Warsaw to Venice through Vienna. So it seems that we had a fabulous starting point, starting with the international business that is clearly the most profitable part of today's postal world. Unfortunately, these days, the landscape changed a bit, and Polish Post is almost entirely focused on the domestic postal business. Barely 5% comes from the international business. Let me show you a few numbers. Total turnover around 1.3 billion euro. Employees, still a big number, almost 80,000 at the end of 2014, EBITDA 62, EBIT at the level of 25 million euro. As to the structure, you wouldn't probably be a lot of surprise seeing mail taking 65%, parcels 13, and 22 coming from additional businesses, mainly financial and retail. In terms of operational channels and other elements, 4,500 our own branches, almost 3,000 agencies and across the Poland, and clearly some other channels. Recently, we signed a deal with the biggest gas station chain in Poland, Orlen, for collection of parcels. Then almost 30,000 red boxes, 23,000 mailmans. And what is interesting, especially if you still remember the numbers which Kunas has been presented, 5 million mail per day. If you remember, Belgium was almost 10 million, if I remember correctly, twice so big. The reason is very simple. I mean, our bureaucracy had not enough time to grow over the time, and unfortunately, the number of mails in Poland is significantly lower than in the Western Europe. That, of course, adds some complexity to the entire picture. Then, in terms of a parcel, this is actually a big change coming every year. These days, it's 200,000 parcels a day, but it's growing rapidly, as in other European countries. Well, if you look at that, these numbers looks very much old-fashioned in terms of the split of between mails and parcels. But I can assure you that a few years ago, 2010, it was even worse. We had some 70% coming from mail and not even 10% coming from parcels. This is because Polish Post lost the track on parcels in between 2000 and 2010. And only after we changed the structure in 2009 from the part of administration into the joint stock company, still owned by the state, but this time run fully by the commercial code with the first board chosen by the contest My colleagues came from the banking industry. I came from the telco industry. TP Group was a part of Orange Group. So a bit shaking up in 2010, 2 years before the market has been fully liberalized, fully open, which happened January 1st, 2013. Now, when it happened, competition was one of our concerns, of course. But the biggest concern was universal services. The new Polish law has ensured only 3 years period of time during which we've been given a privilege to be a universal services provider. You can see the comparison with other countries. We had only three years period of time. Just this December, the last December, as a Christmas gift, we've got an invitation for the tender from our regulator. And we spent really, really tough 3 months preparing new offer. So far, we're good. We've been, as the only one, qualified as a second round. There was 2 candidates at the beginning, scoring 210 out of 220 points, which also shows strengths of national operators in that kind of struggles. However, that was, of course, risky, especially if you just look at the structure, 65% of male, 80,000 people. You may think about other scenarios, what would happen if. Luckily, this is not the case, so we may just proceed further with our transformation and, and talk about different model of universality. Now, why it is important? When we were preparing our new strategy, 2020, I thought, originally when we started to work, I thought that strategy 2020 sounds good. But then everyone just learned that everyone also has working on the 2020 strategy, so probably we've made a mistake here. But when we were thinking about that, we thought that universal services is not just important because of elements like revenue, like income and networks and volumes and all this stuff. I would just put and emphasize what Kun just said, and the emotions which comes with our business, which playing more and more important roles, and I will talk about that later on. We came with the new mission statement, which is trusted, close, and safe, and we believe this is actually very much correlated with the values that lies behind the universal services, even traditional model of universal services, which is accessibility, affordability, quality, and safety. In terms of a scope universal services, no surprise, this is more or less the same you can find in other countries, so I will not elaborate on this any further. Now, the picture is going to change. We do believe that in 2020, the picture is going to change completely, and actually you will see the reverse model of non-universal services versus universal services. Currently, it's 70-30. We do believe, looking at our trends, that it will reverse into 30-70, although still, over these 5 years, this is a key and the most important, one of the most important points in our transformation. The main reason you see on the right-hand side, the substitution in Poland is speeding up. The last year, I had the pleasure to talk to you during the Berlin conference. We still predicted like six years. Unfortunately, 2014 ended with -11. Well, that's not the biggest number in Europe, but still, it's relatively high, and we believe it's going to continue over the next few years. Now, considering universal services, we looked at what are the main elements that are influencing that kind of services. Those are similar in all our countries. However, sometimes there are significant differences country by country, and we believe that actually in Poland, just for the few reasons I'm going to explain, these differences make the final conclusion a little bit maybe different than in some other countries that started the transformation, especially digital transformation, not just the postal transformation, much earlier than we. I talked to you about the e-substitution. It's fueled basically by B2B business. Poland is lucky enough to grow economy over the last 7 years steadily. I mean, the economy is growing this year 4%, but we never get red over the last 7 years since the crisis started. But there's also a downside. With that came a huge pressure on the prices, And we see it with our biggest customers like the banking sector, telco. Those companies are really speeding up in terms of their efforts. Those markets are very competitive in Poland. We have 4 mobile operators, for example, which is quite a unique situation in Europe. So they put a lot of pressure on prices. That means they put a lot of pressure on us, and that, of course, makes the e-substitution working faster and faster. The other story is e-government. I mean, if you look at indexes like Economical and Society Digital Index published by the European Commission, we are lagging behind. We are like 23rd, 23rd or 24th countries in Europe. Well, it's bad, but it's good for us, because that means that the digital is going a bit slower. And that's, of course, fully understandable when you see development of infrastructure. I'm talking about not postal, but rather telco infrastructure. Only 60% of Poles has an access to, well, only, that's not a bad number, but it's only 60% of Poles has access to broadband infrastructure. Although they do have an access through the mobile, which is very popular in Poland, almost 65% of Poles is using heavily internet, when the rest, 35%, is saying they don't see a need for using internet. Believe me or not, that's a result we see every year since 3 years. And it's not changing very quickly. That's, of course, about technological adaptation. We've adapted few things very fast, like internet banking, for example. But generally, we also, and due to the demography and the migration trends, we have a lot of people that really do not rely heavily on digital tools. Demography, no surprise, the Polish society is getting older. We have a lower percentage of young people, up to 19%, one of the lowest in Europe. In terms of old people, well, in the middle age, which means my age, 50 plus, we predict that this group is growing by 2% until 2020. So that will be in total like 12% of entire society. And then, of course, migration. The Poland is having a little bit different scheme than the rest of the Europe. We have more than 30% living in small towns and villages and suburbs. And that's actually going that direction still. I mean, the people are just living cities. So this is the surrounding we are living in, and that will help you to understand why universal services is very important for us. When we were considering during the strategy what we can do with universal services, we of course look at different options. We're talking about adapting universal services. Well, still, the current regulatory framework gives our regulator enough power to maneuver within the European directive and to, for example, change for a certain region 5 days into 3 days' time. We cannot exclude we will go for it, but we don't believe that is going to change dramatically the picture. And moreover, we don't think we should do this too often. The narrowing scope is, of course, because of the legislative purpose, is not the option for us. I'm talking about the changes like shifting from 2 kilograms to 1 kilograms. Those are the very nice, interesting discussions, but a little bit beyond our scope. And of course, there is a tension to say, okay, because of the cost associated, let's minimize universal services, let's keep it to the required minimum and adjust your network to it. We decided that because of the reasons I've just explained to you, but also because of our strategy, this is not our option. So we decided to go for reshaping the scope and redefine universality if we understand it. Now, if you, therefore, we started with a very easy and probably self-explainable picture. Then you have a growth area, and no surprise, this is when you can find parcels. Our goal for 2020 is to be one of the top 3 parcel operators. We are far from that momentum. Yet, although the last couple of years proved that we are going into the right direction, we doubled our express mail services based on the last report of our regulator over the last year. This is a growth area, but if you still remember the numbers, the most important is stabilization. which basically means a kind of a hybrid model, partially coming from the universal services, and partially coming from the need to deliver new services to the community and to build a new shape of universal services. And as you may see, we do this through delivering financial services. This is a model based on our own bank. We own the bank 75% plus one share. This is kind of a joint venture with the biggest Polish bank, which actually is fulfilling their activities exclusively through our networks. We own also free insurance company, and this business is actually quite a fast-growing business, and retail services, but we also go into the mass custom services like energy companies, utilities companies that actually are very keen to work through our network. So going back a bit to this emotionality and to that element of the business, which, as I said, is not always, but more and more often linked to the financial result, we do believe that universal services and the value which lie behind the universal service, quality, accessibility, affordability, and safety, give us, well, that's not probably a discovery, a trust which is, and it was always needed in the old times, but is more and more needed also in the digital zone. By the way, because we're talking about we're talking about some elements which are beyond universal services, our Envelope platform, which is our digital arm, a kind of a startup we created 2 years ago, is going to be fully operational. Actually, it's already fully operational, but the entire range of products is going to be accomplished this year, similar as Kon said, e-postcard and digital stamps, but also secure mails, secure signature, electronic stamps, all these things consolidated in one integrated platform. And the trust is also one of the elements very important for that new product and for the launching on the market. So that turns into the new businesses, which in our case, as I said, prove over the last 2 years to be enormously successful in terms of the revenue, although the numbers are still relatively small. Why it's so? Because we do believe that the key differentiator for us as a Post is the place between the e-shops, business clients, and the end users. We, as it was already emphasized, we have a unique access, a unique footprint in the last mile. The other question is that we cannot fully monetize on it yet, but we started to do this through the different type of a product and different type of a cooperation with different type of entities like a government. We do identity projects on our networks. We work with community, with the customer care points. We are selling different products like railways tickets together with Polish Railways. That creates a very important bond that is then fully utilized in our relation with e-commerce, and that make the circle working very well. So summarizing, for us, universality is not just a regulatory obligation, and for the next 5 years, universal services is for us one of the key elements in order to make our strategy working properly. But the universal services I'm talking about is not what you would see as a model solution coming from the regulation. It's kind of a hybrid model, as I said, coming from the merger between the universal services as regulated and additional services we put to our network in order to make it working properly and in order to work more effectively also for the purpose of the growing area, which is a parcel business. I believe that's all I had to say for today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric. And clearly, I think some more food for thought and a different approach again as to how we address some of these issues.